latecomers to file in. I am hoping that we see a return of the people from last week, because I'm very much hoping to put you guys back into the same breakout groups as last week, since they were such effective discussions. So we'll wait just a couple of minutes before we start. So while we're waiting, are there any questions for me as we sort of come to the conclusion of this 4-session course?
You've said you run a lot of hackathons. Do you know of like educational institutions that do that within their own schools or districts? Or
Yeah, I mean, I have done many within my own schools. So it's really a matter of, either having a professor within the school system who, does those, or more likely bringing in an expert who's, because I've done 200 plus, for example. Okay. And I'm going to share a hackathon I'm doing at the Berklee College of Music in a couple of weeks, right? Which may not sound necessarily like the kind of place where you would run a hackathon, but I think you'll be amazed at what I'm talking about. I'm going to invite all of you to participate if you have any interest in doing so. Okay. So they are incredibly energizing events. Now, have you participated in any yourself, Vanessa?
No.
Yeah. They're amazingly great at generating ideas and then creating rapid solutions in the form of prototypes to solving problems. They're pretty transformative events. And for a lot of people, once you've done one, it's like Lay's potato chips. You can't have got to keep going back again and again and again, which is my experience. All right. We're still pretty slow trickling in. See, if we were in California, they have what is called Berklee time. When I teach at Berklee, 10 minutes late is on time. Okay. We don't have that in Providence, obviously. But we'll have a 5-minute grace period, and then we'll get started, since I want to make sure we're all on the same page from the start. So I was in San Francisco this past week. I was at an amazing innovation boot camp, and then I'm out walking, right? And I've been living in San Francisco and Boston off and on for years. And I've always seen these robo-taxis driving around, but there was always a human driver behind the wheel because they were training them. This time, for the first time, I saw the robo-taxi go by with absolutely nobody in the car. And I have to say that is a very surreal experience to see a vehicle on a 4-lane road, working its way through the city. And unfortunately, that very night, some of you may have seen a woman had been hit by a car, not a robo-taxi, but it knocked her into the street, into the path of a robo-taxi. And she was pinned under the robo-taxi and is now in critical condition, right? So I had a lot of opportunities to ask a lot of Uber drivers over the course of the week what they thought of robo-taxis, and not a single one of them had anything positive to say. So it's just, it's interesting to see what will happen in San Francisco, because there have been a lot of very early negative experiences that kind of belie the talking points of these companies, which is that they're much safer than human drivers. I'd say that remains to be seen. It's one thing on a test track. It's another thing entirely in a city where people are, jaywalking and dogs are running across the street. So very, very interesting. All right. Well, it's 5:03, and I certainly hope we have more than the group that is with us, but let us get started. So today I wanted to wrap up by, we're going to cover these readings, although we're probably not going to take as much time as we normally have to discuss the readings, because I would like to have a pretty meaningful breakout group experience before we wrap up, and I'm just going to look at the chat. Okay. All right. So, but why don't I just ask, Vanessa, you asked me right out of the gate about hackathons. What would you say you took away from that article?
So it reminded me of the energy that I feel when I go to like educational conferences when we're stuck in a hotel together for 3 days.
Yeah.
And there's just tons of workshops, or when I was a Fuse fellow in Providence, and coming together with a group of educators from all different schools at all different levels, administrators, teachers,
Yeah.
coaches, and just coming together to solve problems. So like it was just a different energy.
Yeah, it's a very high level of energy, very collaborative, and very solution focused. So absolutely. Anybody else want to comment on the hackathon reading? Anything about it that was either surprising to you or different than maybe what you thought a hackathon might be? And yeah, please, Rebecca.
I guess I have to admit, I have had 0 to none, no experience with hackathons prior to the readings this week. And I think I was most surprised by the collaborative nature and the fact that they are much more collaborative than competitive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so that was a surprise to me. And I could it was interesting to just think about sort of what the psychology in the room must be like, in any situation. Vanessa, you were just talking about being at a conference, but I'm also thinking about just what the energy is like if you're towing the line at a road race or something, or you're doing something when you're with a large group of people and you all feel really passionate about something. And so it was just really cool to think of a hackathon as being that thing, but for the purpose of solving a problem.
That's great. And by the way, I wasn't really at a conference. I was at a boot camp, right? So if you look at the reading, there's sort of these 3 different open innovation tournaments. And so I was at a boot camp, a Singularity University boot camp, which is all about, very leading edge sort of technology and solving, the SDGs, right? The United Nations development goals, right? And so this experience was very much like you described, right? We were all in teams, all trying to come up with breakthrough ideas, but at the same time, incredibly supportive and collaborative and celebrating one another's insights and success, right? And it's, I got to tell you, it is one of the most energizing experiences that I've participated in. So yeah, it's finding that community, right? And so good hackathon leaders are good at curating these events, making sure you're bringing in the right people with the right mindset. So that's great. Thank you, Rebecca. What about the 2 readings on creative confidence? Anything jump out at you from those 2? All right. Well, then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about creative confidence as we get into the session. So, we want to talk about, activating your creative thinking, and your capabilities to go from a blank page to insight. And a hackathon is one of many ways to do that. Right. And so let's get into the content. So,
Mike,
please
ask a quick question.
Yes.
Back to the hackathon.
Yeah.
On page 2, it talks about the importance of co-location.
Yeah.
And note that this was written in 2018 before COVID. What's your experience with online versus in person?
It's a great question. I'm so glad you asked, Bethany. It turns out that a lot of times I think we overestimated the need for co-location. I don't think there's any question that if you can co-locate, you can do it. But during COVID, you may remember I mentioned that I led a 1-month design sprint virtually, right, across 43 countries. And another hackathon I helped lead, we had 1,200 participants literally from around the globe in the early days of the shutdown, right? And it worked brilliantly, right? We literally went through round the clock for 72 hours. And we made it work, right? So you have to obviously have the right tools to do that. So we used a Discord server and a lot of other platforms for virtual communication, but you can certainly make it work. if you have to. And I'm going to be inviting all of you to a hackathon at the Berklee College of Music, and I'm running it as a hybrid event. I'm running it on Saturday, the 28th of October. And I've got people dialing in virtually from around the world, and I've got people showing up, in downtown Boston. So I think it's a great question. So clearly, we're living through what Confucius would say are interesting times, right? And a lot of people don't understand that was actually a Chinese curse, right? May you live in interesting times was not like the Irish blessing. Okay, it was the antithesis of that. And it'd be hard to argue as we, for the first time in the history of our country, we booted the Speaker of the House out of his job yesterday after only 269 days in role. We are living in incredibly interesting times right now. And so so for all of you, right, my hope for all of you is may you lead in what I would call exponential times, right? Everything is changing exponentially. And so, as I was in this insanely energizing boot camp last week with a lot of like-minded passionistas who are all about innovation, right? This quote was something that I was reminded of. The future is already here. It's not just evenly distributed. So this morning, I sat through a webinar from a company known as Zendesk and was just gobsmacked by how much they've incorporated generative AI into their customer support and employee experience applications. Okay, Zendesk has been around since the early 2000s, and they've become one of the standard bearers for providing, support capabilities to people that are doing customer service, customer support, and within the HR realm, employee experience, and also help desk around IT. And so there's no question, as I look at a lot of the research, there are people that have jumped out to an early lead, integrating a lot of this capability into their businesses. So Bethany and I both enjoyed this article, and Bethany, you're a ringer, so you cannot tell people what this acronym stands for. Okay, it's not FOMO, it's FOBO. Does anybody have any idea what FOBO might mean? And I know that you can look it up, but you're probably not going to find it, because if you look it up, you're going to see fear of being online. But that's not what I'm getting to. So anybody want to take a guess? My hint is we're talking a lot about skills today. Skills and tool sets. That's my hint. This is fear of becoming obsolete. Does anybody have FOBO? Who's got FOBO? I have had perpetual FOBO from my college days, which is why I read like a maniac. And you do too, Pop. That's great, right? It's good to admit it. We all need a little bit of it. It's healthy, okay? And so how do we make sure that we don't become obsolete? Well, there's this sort of perfect triad. We've got to make sure that we've got the right mindset. We've got to continue to upskill ourselves, and that's partially what this course has been about, as well as the mindset. And then the tool set, right? A lot of the frameworks that we have learned, we'll continue to learn tonight, right? So mindset is just making sure that we are open-minded to what is coming at us. And so, the attitude should be, what if, why not, let's go. Okay, not, oh my God, I can't imagine changing. Let's just keep doing things the way we always have. That is not the right mindset. So I shared an excerpt from an article with you. And I thought because we've got so many people from the education space, I thought that you might find this case study, this little mini case study, interesting. So Roland Fryer, he is a professor of economics at Harvard and also the partner of Equal Opportunity Ventures. He was one of the youngest ever tenured professors at Harvard at age 30. Wow. He won a Genius Award, a MacArthur Fellowship in 2011. He won a John Bates Clark Medal Award in 2015. This is the award given by the American Economics Association to the most scholarly economist under the age of 40. And his research has been all about the causes and consequences of racial economic disparity. And what he expressed to his partner, and by the way, Bill Hellman, who's quoted, is a venture capitalist who has invested in a couple of my businesses. So it was very interesting to read of Mr. Hellman's second chapter, which is much more of a social and environmentally conscious chapter after making an insane amount of money at one of the most storied venture capital funds in the world. And so what Professor Fryer said is, I'm really frustrated. I get all of these incredible awards, but my insights are not translated into the real world. And so my goal is to harness capitalism to improve income mobility and address intractable social problems, right? Getting a medal when nothing happens doesn't really satisfy me. And so obviously one of his lessons is, right, the way of thinking, the entrepreneurial mindset way of thinking that we have been talking about in this course was very foreign to me in this academic environment, because at Harvard, the idea of failing is really scary. And you're just simply not supposed to fail. And I can imagine many of you would agree with that statement, okay? You're supposed to get things exactly right. And Bill would talk about wearing failure like a badge of honor. And so Professor Fryer became a partner with Bill Hellman in something called Equal Opportunity Ventures. And he's now translating his research into funding startups that are trying to address some of these extraordinarily intractable problems. And they've had some very interesting early successes, right? So this is a mindset shift for an eminent scholar to move into the world of capitalism and be able to sort of create this balance between his research interest and his desire to have a positive impact on the world, okay? Second, we talked about skills, right? You need the right mindset, but you need the right skill set. And skill set is how we channel our human energies, okay? Obviously, all of us come into this session with our academic backgrounds, our industry experience. Perhaps some of us have been, spending time, upskilling, learning new skills, taking on new projects, new responsibilities. But, we are going to need to continuously upskill if we're going to lead in exponential times. And then finally, the tool set, okay? And the tool set is going to become increasingly digital over time. And all I can share with you is that if you've been reading some of the research from Professor Ethan Mollick, there is no doubt that the level of productivity increase by people that are using generative AI in their daily work is exponentially significant compared to where they've been before. Okay, it's time to lean in. And so we talked, two of the readings were about creative confidence. And so I want to ask a few of you, what does creativity mean to you? How do you think of creativity? And do you think it's relevant to what you do? So I see Vanessa and Bethany and Rachel all nodding their heads vigorously, and I now have a hand up. Okay, so Povilas, please. Pav?
So creativity is, just like in the article, it stated, it's not really about being able to sculpt or paint or draw. It's right. About being able to solve a problem, like gather the information that you know, gather information that you don't know, and see if you can find a solution for whatever is at hand.
That's great. So it's this open-mindedness, right? To say, there's so much information out there, right? And there's an opportunity to kind of reframe the problem and create solutions that, really do approach that problem. That's great. Who here thinks that they are creative? And I don't, and this is not you bragging, but who wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I think I'm pretty creative. I'm not intimidated. So Bethany, I love it. So what makes you creative?
Well, I think what resonated with the article, the first article, Creative Confidence, was I really do love learning new things and doing things different ways and figuring out novel approaches. I'm also a writer and an actress.
Really? Wow.
So it's like part of kind of just, I like, since I was little, I mean, that's just kind of how I'm wired, but I'm not an artist. I'm not.
Right. And you're my process advocate. So you're a very interesting, work in progress of this wonderful duality of this artistic sensibility. And you're always there advocating for more process. So I love it. I love it. Left brain, right brain. Cool. Vanessa?
I also have a background in music and art and theater,
Wow.
too. But when I was reading the article, what resonated with me was, and thinking about my workplace, is what I do after I'm told no.
I would love it. See,
So
this is my favorite quote. There's a fine line between entrepreneurship and insubordination. Okay, I love it. So keep going. I'm sorry.
No,
So what do
yeah,
you do?
and you
What do you
said
do?
that before too.
Yeah, yeah.
No, yeah. So it's really like, for me, it's taking it as unless it's like a hard no, it's a no for now. And how do I reapproach this? Did I not communicate it in a way that, it was received the way I wanted it to receive, and kind of finding other ways to communicate what I'm trying to achieve.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, is that a learned mindset, or is that something that you were sort of naturally born with, that you learned as a young girl and you were able to keep wearing your parents down to get what you wanted?
I've been told I'm stubborn,
Okay.
by growing up. So I wonder if that's the translation of that, but also, and a lot of these articles that you had us read, keep bringing me back to graduate school and, taking courses in creativity. So my graduate degree is in a gifted education and talent development. So a lot of that was really about being creative and being resourceful, and understanding the creative problem solving process as it was taught when I took those courses.
Right.
So it's really bringing me back, and all of that I've taken with me into the world of education. So
that's great. And I would say being called stubborn is a compliment. Okay. Especially in the world we're living in. Okay. It's a compliment. Rebecca, your hand was up and down. I don't know if you wanted to share, but want to give it the opportunity.
I mean, just a quick thought or addition to the conversation. I wanted to say that, so I do make art quite a bit. I'm a potter.
Wow.
And sometimes I like to think that that's my first job, and that it's, and then I've got my day job. But so along those lines, what struck me in reading the two articles by and about the Kelly brothers is that, I was really taken in by the whole concept of C-level people going out into the world in which their business functions, or in which the world that their business impacts.
Yes.
And what that does in terms of the thought process. And it reminded me of the fact that, I know plenty of painters and potters who are definite one-trick ponies.
Right.
Knowing how to mold with clay or paint does not always mean that you're a creative person. People can get very stuck in their ruts.
Yeah.
In artistic pursuits, and in business pursuits. And so what really struck me was this whole concept of getting out of your comfort zone.
Love it.
To be able to find those creative solutions.
I love it. That's perfect. Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, Bethany, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was just listening to you, Rebecca, too. I wonder, we're just talking about that need to fail, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if when you are an artist, you're built in knowing okay, this isn't the right form. I'm gonna chuck this clay and start over. If there's more of a resilience for failure built in, and willingness to try stuff different ways.
And since you're all from Boston, right? The Cars had one heck of a run. Okay. The band called the Cars, that new wave band. And there was a very lengthy Boston Globe article a couple of weekends ago about how they just continue to evolve. They were so determined to make it that they continue to change. At one point, they were like a country band and a folk band. And Rick Ocasek and a couple of the core members, they were going to make it. And they just kept testing new approaches, new sounds, new identities until they had one of the most successful albums of, the last 50 years of the 20th century. Right. And I think we all know examples of artists that have struggled like that. And then, and they find their path at some point. But it goes back to Vanessa's point about being stubborn, right? About, I know I want to express myself in this world in a certain way. And if someone doesn't like this, then I'm going to keep going until I find it. So last question, does anybody want to talk about a product that you think is incredibly creative and why? Something that just appeared on the scene and sort of changed your view of the world in some way, or made your life incredibly more satisfying or incredibly more efficient?
I think the iPhone.
Yeah. No question. It changed life on planet Earth, didn't it? I mean, we are all, for better or worse, Eric, we are living in the iPhone era, right? It's now a 14-year-old era. And, at some point we may move from the iPhone to the Apple, spatial computing goggles that are out there now. That may be a few years from now. We may all be walking around with goggles on before long, but there's no question. I think it's at least a 2-decade profound influence on humankind. Thank you. Yeah, Pav?
So I have 4 months ago, my son was born, and I never
congratulations.
Thank you. And I never paid attention to any baby products or how innovative or interesting they are. And a company that has blown my mind of how they rethink some of the traditional ways that sort of baby products are presented, marketed, designed. And the company is called Frida Baby.
Spell it. The first word, Frida.
Frida.
Okay.
So it's spelled Frida.
Frida Baby. Okay.
Frida Baby, and you probably see the products.
Yeah.
Different markets, but the one that we just got was a humidifier.
Yeah.
And every humidifier that's out there, it's actually very hard to clean.
Yeah.
That poses algae issues.
Oh yeah.
All of this stuff. They've come up with such a brilliant design. All it is, it's like a lid that lifts off. You can clean it out. I don't know why nobody else thought of it.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward because they immersed themselves. They asked parents what was wrong with the product, right?
Yep.
And they listened. Yeah.
And every product that they do, from the scissors, because the problem with babies is that cutting nails, they're so soft.
Right.
They designed a scissor that basically cuts from both sides in a way that you don't expect it.
Yeah.
And it actually works.
I love it. So these people are design thinkers. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. I can't wait, right? Because I can't wait to check them out. And so I love how passionate you are and how impressed you are as a new dad and as a designer, so that you can really appreciate the thought process they brought to this line of baby products. Love it. All right, cool. Anybody else want to jump in before we move forward? All right. So if you don't think you can gain or regain creative confidence, I'm going to challenge you right now. So this past summer, I had the pleasure of teaching a 40 contact hour graduate course. And what was amazing, and the name of the course was Creativity and Innovation. I had 44 students in the class. It was virtual. So I had students from Australia. I had students from China. I had students from Lithuania, from Mexico, from all around the world. And when I looked at the first assignment that they had to complete, which was a reflection, in many ways, answering a lot of the same questions that I just asked you about, their level of creative confidence, it was incredibly consistent how few of them had creative confidence, right? They were really doubting. Even a woman who teaches creativity and, at the California College of the Arts and, works in Hollywood, right? And so the good news is, over the course of that semester, that summer session, we engaged in many, many different exercises. This one is an especially satisfying one for me. This is called Lego Serious Play. And I know that serious play is an oxymoron, But what is amazing about Lego Serious Play is that when we touch Legos, we activate that inner creative child, that 5-year-old that won that marshmallow challenge that we spoke about last week, the one that didn't have their creative confidence beaten out of them by their elementary school systems, that wasn't forced to conform to whatever society says you should do. And so I was really encouraged to see how quickly people could recover their creative confidence, right? Rebuild what would be flabby, atrophied creative muscle mass in just 7 weeks. And so we had so many different experiences, and this was not unlike the Marshmallow Challenge. And here we asked them to build the highest freestanding Lego tower in the classroom. And man, we just had so much fun, right? And I think that the students just really walked out of there after 3 days, floating on a cloud, having reclaimed that inner creative child that they had thought they had left behind years or decades ago. So it is absolutely possible, right? And so you read a couple of articles by the Kelly brothers. And here is David, who is the founder of IDEO, Steve Jobs' best man, and the secret weapon behind Apple. And the message is, right, there's no longer, we're not selling to a business, we're not selling to a consumer. It's human to human, okay? And when you think about what Pav said, okay, about Frida Baby, they get this. They understand that the human that they are serving is obviously the infant, and of course mom and dad, because mom and dad are super concerned about not screwing up in any way, shape, or form. God forbid you hurt your baby when you're cutting their nails, or you're so frustrated by how hard it is to clean that you don't clean it enough, and the child gets some kind of infection, right? So it's very much about the word empathy, right? At the heart of human-centered design, it's brought to you in Sesame Street terms by the letter E. Okay. So human-centered design is about empathy, full stop. Okay. And so this process, as the Kelly brothers share so articulately, is of course, a tremendous amount of discovery work or empathy work, which allows us to frame a problem. Not framing it from our perspective, but framing it from the stakeholder's perspective. And only then do we really begin to ideate on a solution, right? So many people begin creating the solution even before they do any empathy work. They just believe that they have this special knowledge. So they don't have to talk to users. They don't have to talk to stakeholders. We already know. And the answer is no, that's never going to work. And of course, one of the keys is to create a prototype. And that may sound intimidating to those of you who are not engineers or not architects. But a prototype is simply a more intuitive way to boil the essence of your solution down such that you can communicate it unambiguously. Because let's be honest, right? The English language is complex. And just because I say something doesn't mean you understand what I'm saying, right? We all bring our own experiential lenses, our own baggage. And I see so many times when someone is communicating and someone is nodding their head vigorously as if they understand, but in fact, they don't understand at all. So the prototype is a way to remove that ambiguity, eliminate a lot of that wasted time, and get meaningful feedback from the stakeholder that either says, yes, I'm on track, or no, I've got to go back to the drawing board again. Okay. And so this goes back to what Rebecca had talked about, right? The importance of anthropological observation. Jose Colucci is a partner at IDEO in the Cambridge area that I've worked with, had him in my classroom. And I love this quote. People don't do what they say they do. They don't do what we think they're going to do. And they don't even do what they think they're going to do. That doesn't mean that they're liars. It means that they are emotional. It means that, they are finding their way. And so when we're in the very early, very fuzzy, very ambiguous phases of understanding a problem, we need to move away from the mindset that it's just all about these market surveys, right? It's not about SurveyMonkey or a lot of data. This is much more qualitative. This is much more intuitive. This is about looking people in the eye. This is about observing them in their natural habitat, whatever that might be. And that could be the product team from Frida Baby going into people's homes and seeing how they interact with their infants. It can be someone going into a company where they're manufacturing something. So there's a lot to be said about anthropological observation, okay? So when we get to observe customers in the wild, right, they're not pretending to be anything. We're seeing the way they really work. And sometimes they might not even know. It's become so second nature to them about what they do. They can't articulate it verbally. But yet when you watch them do things, it's like, oh my God, that is so different from what they said. And so, I love this quote. So you may know the name John Maeda. For many years, he was the president of RISD. He's a remarkably capable man. And I love this quote from him. It's more about feeling the rhythm than knowing the tune, right? Really being able to imbibe what is the intent, what is the mindset. Okay. So that requires a very creative mindset to do that. Okay. And so we need to see the world with new eyes. Okay. Exactly as Rebecca shared, right? You got to get out of your comfort zone. You got to reframe the world. I had shared with you this Burning Man experience last week during our class, where all societal rules are just completely obliterated. And it forces you to kind of completely reframe the way that you see the world. Okay. And so one of the ways that we get breakthrough ideas is we get inspired by observing extreme users. And you may remember, who remembers the passage about the Formula One team? Does anybody recall that passage in the reading? Yeah. So Rebecca, would you just quickly share just really high level what you took away from that? Because it's very powerful.
It was power. You mean with respect to the transfer of patients from the operating room to the...
Yeah.
So a doctor at the Great Ormond Street Hospital in London was having a very difficult time observing the chaos that would ensue when patients were transferred from... I just think it was... I mean, I know everybody's read the article, so I don't need to recount it. But I was really struck by even just the creativity of that doctor's thinking that it was a Formula One pit crew who would have the answer. So even just that line of thinking, I thought was insanely creative. How he was able to see something that very disparate group of people with such very different jobs would have to offer in that setting, I thought was amazing. Yeah.
So that's brilliant. Thank you, Rebecca. So, so remember, let's go back to the mindset, right? One of the three keys is the mindset, right? So this unbelievable willingness to see beyond his little sphere, right? Because we all know medical doctors sometimes can have a very high sense of self-importance, okay? Especially surgeons. And so for him to look across and see this beautiful choreography, because there's no other way to describe it, the choreography of a Formula One pit crew, right? Where and I can tell you, they continue to get more and more efficient because you can win or lose a race in like 10 seconds, right? By a 10-second screw up in a pit. Every action is considered right down to, the microsecond. And today, this is just one of many examples of, there was another one that I found interesting, which was, if you think about a defibrillator, right? A lot of these defibrillators, right? These are the things that shock your heart when you're having a cardiac event. And a lot of them were designed, by medical doctors for medical doctors. And so the older ones would be put into these public buildings like airports and sports arenas, but they were very complex. And, if you are with someone who's having a cardiac event, you are stressed out. And so what they found is a lot of times people could not use these. They were just rendered incapable. And the company was known as Smart Heart. It eventually was acquired by Philips Healthcare. they said, okay, I have an idea. We're going to let 5-year-olds test these devices. We're going to make this so simple that a 5-year-old child can actually operate this. Okay, removing all of this complexity around the device. And if you see it, it's got like 2 buttons on it, right? A red button and a green button, right? So this is, another example of an extreme user, in this case, a child who is saying, yes, this is something that I can operate. So I love these examples of looking for real insights, breakthrough insights from extreme users. Okay. All right. And then let's talk about open innovation. Open innovation means knowing that there is a lot of collective wisdom outside the 4 walls of your organization. And it's in our best interest to be able to tap into that wisdom whenever we need it. And so right from the reading, we have these 3 different forms of open innovation. There are others, but one is more of a crowd-based contest. And this is typically done at scale. And you could literally have thousands of companies and so what you see in these kinds of things is a lot of people, rather than do the New York Times crossword puzzle or Sudoku on a weekend, they'll tap into a number of these innovation crowd-based contests like InnoSight. And they will, this is a form of, sort of mental gymnastics for them. And what's amazing is almost over half of the time, the solution doesn't come from people in the industry. It comes from people in a completely different world. They're approaching the problem in an amazingly fresh way. And so a lot of times you'll see, like General Electric one time, they were having some trouble with a locomotive in China. And they had all of these PhDs working on the problem. They spent millions of dollars. They couldn't solve it. And so they had a crowd-based contest. And in a weekend, some person that has no experience at all came up with the idea to solve the problem. And it's not that different when I shared with the mechanical ventilator contest I ran, during the early days of COVID. Boot camps is much more about learning new skills, new knowledge, transfer of knowledge, and it has a tremendous amount of value. But what I want to bring to your attention is the middle column, right? A hackathon. And let's be very clear. Hackathons started where people did coding, but I've done over 200 hackathons and very few of them have required coding. Okay. But in each case, whether it be a social impact hackathon, an AI for good hackathon, in each case, there were clear challenges that were outlined and teams were formed and they were given some very specific amount of time. It could have been 24 hours, 36 hours, 72 hours to come up with a breakthrough solution. And almost always, the output, the deliverable is a pitch and a prototype. Okay. And the energy is palpable. So, so hackathon is a mashup of the word hack, and hack is not a cyber hacker. It's not someone breaking into a system. Hack is more of a, let's come up with a quick solution. And then thon comes from marathon, right? This is something that is done continuously over some period of time. So a hackathon is that mashup between those 2 thoughts. And one of the many hackathons that I led and brought 75 of my students into was a hackathon for Nestle Skin Health. Nestle had just acquired a skin health and wellness company for several $billion. They were new to the business. And so I organized hackathons for them. They had set up these innovation centers in New York City by NYU and in Singapore and other places around the world. And there were 4 specific challenges that we posed to the students. And over the course of a weekend, the students then came up with some remarkably innovative solutions. And many of them had no background in skin health or skincare, although many of them, of course, were consumers of these products, right? And so it really was sort of a very interesting starting point. All the prototypes then wound up moving into the product owners at Nestle, right? So even big industrial companies, traditional companies can do this. Now, And prototyping, of course, doesn't mean that you have to have a computer-aided design system or a 3D modeling system. A prototype can be something as simple as a sketch. It can be something as simple as a pitch. Although increasingly, with all of these new generative AI tools and all of these new mock-up tools, it's very, very easy to create mock-ups with literally the push of a button. So if prototyping was intimidating, it shouldn't be anymore. There's just hundreds and hundreds of super easy to use applications that allow us to do this. Now, I'm going to invite all of you, and I see that we've got several artists in the group, which is even more cool. So I am good friends with a woman named Annette Phillip, who is on the faculty of the Berklee College of Music in Boston. And Berklee has gone global, as you know. It's now in Valencia. It's all around the world. And Berklee is the unique institution. It's the Juilliard of popular music in America. Artists have won roughly 400 Grammy Awards. They're graduates, and at least 25 are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Annette was the very first woman or person from India to join the Berklee faculty. She came over right after her undergraduate studies in India. And she has built something called the Berklee Indian Ensemble over the last 13 years. And they recently signed a contract with Sony India. They put out their first album called Sharat, and they were nominated for a Grammy. And here's what's really, and they've had 300,000 YouTube views. So they've gotten a remarkable amount of global visibility. Now, here's what's interesting, and I think for many of you in the academic environment, Berklee turns out to be both a good and a bad steward, because Berklee is not supporting Annette and the Berklee India Ensemble in any way financially. Okay. And Annette often has to ask for permission to do things. So she is very passionate about sharing Indian culture. She's very, very ambitious. She wants to share Indian culture on a broader scale. She wants to do stadium shows. She wants to cultivate the next generation of artists from India, and not classical music, a lot of much more fusion, a lot more global music. And what she has found in her experience is that people from the Indian diaspora think about the arts maybe differently than we might here in America. On the one hand, parents are still very much pushing their kids into either engineering or medicine. Right. I mean, it's hard to find an Indian family that doesn't have at least one engineering and one medical child in their family, if not more. And so, the idea that money would go into scholarships for pursuing the arts is something that's been very challenging. The other challenge is that when Indian people have the means to be philanthropic or to donate, they're much more focused on the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, which is food and security, as opposed to the arts. So I had said to Annette, I would love to help you think about how we might reframe some of these challenges and how we might come up with some breakthrough insights and solutions to allow you to realize your ambitious dreams. So on the 28th of October, starting at 10, it's a Saturday, from 10:30 to about 6, I'm leading a hackathon for the India Ensemble. If you have any interest in joining, you can join virtually, or you can come to the beautiful Berklee College in downtown Boston. And it would be, obviously, for some of you, I think, a very cool way to put some of the things that you've learned in class into practice in a very unique setting, right? But I just wanted to, share with you that you can do these kinds of events for pretty much anything. And I wanted to, include you in this community if that's something that you would like to be a part of. Okay. So obviously just an FYI. Okay. And here's just, just their costumery, and they have such an incredible, if you haven't had a chance to listen to them, listen to Sharat. It's just beautiful music. Okay. So now we're going to do a breakout. Okay. And what I'm going to ask you guys to do is and I know that the teams are maybe a little, I'm not sure if everybody, but I'm going to have Rachel move you back into the groups that you were in last week, because I want to build on sort of those relationships. And I'm going to ask you to think about, because I want you to take this course and the learnings into the world when we're done. So I'm going to ask you to identify a person that would be an accountability partner for you, someone that you can remain in touch with after the course, and that when you walk out, I'm going to ask you to think about if there's one thing from the learnings of this course that you would like to bring into your own role or into your department or to your team that you believe will help you to be, a better leader, a more productive, more effective contributor. What will that be? And what action plan will you need to take to make sure that that doesn't just sort of, lose momentum? So for the next 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I'm going to ask you to, just like you did such a great job last week, very effectively, working with one another, challenging one another, supporting one another. What is it that you see in all of the things we've discussed that are going to be the most interesting for you to continue to build on? And then we're going to come back and we're going to report out. We're going to wrap up. Okay. So we will close off the breakout rooms at about 1:15. So we have plenty of time to have you guys report out. Okay. Cool. So Rachel, are you with me?
Yes, I've just opened the rooms.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. It looks like we're back. So welcome back, everyone. I just want to very quickly leverage this this discussion so that we really have the ability to do something meaningful with this course. So let me ask you guys, who would like to start us off? Anybody want to get the ball rolling?
Sure, I can talk for our group.
That's great. Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, in terms of things to take away from the course, we had talked about crowdsourcing information and reaching out to like wider groups of people, even people that you wouldn't necessarily think would have the investment or the buy-in, because they can still have helpful insights and kind of creative solutions because they're not as closely involved. And then someone else in our group talked about wanting to focus on bottom-up innovation and getting kind of leaders more involved at the ground level, and specifically around AI, generative AI, and using that technology to kind of make people's positions easier.
Okay, that's great. So Melissa, let me just ask two clarifying questions. So on the first part, you talked about sort of, reaching out to people sort of outside the normal sphere, right? So more crowdsourcing. So who is going to be doing that?
So that would be. Oh, so that was mine, and Vanessa also said that was a takeaway for her as well.
That's great. And so does this mean going to people outside of your outside of your department or outside of your organization, or how broadly will you seek out these opinions and these perspectives? So
for my work, I would say it's both of those, both within the organization but different departments, and then I do a lot of work with organizations outside of Brown and community partners. So looking for their kind of insight as well. That's great. Thank you. And Vanessa, how far do you take it?
Yeah, so I just had an idea while you and Melissa were talking. So part of my idea was to see why formal coaching cycles are intimidating to folks, and actually going back in and talking with my group, going back in and actually meeting with each of the departments. They're quite small, in person, one-on-one, like the article said, what do you really need, from us, rather than this coaching cycle that we feel like we might be imposing upon you. How can we really help you? But also I'm having virtual coffee with some other instructional coaches next Saturday. I'm going to see what they're doing also, and try to reach out to that community, and also the RISD community.
Oh, that's great. And so these virtual coffees are outside of the Narragansett school system.
Yes.
Awesome. I love it. That's great. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Who's going to jump in next? Bethany, I know that you're not shy. Pav, you're not shy. Rebecca, who wants to jump in next?
I'll, if
Yeah,
you guys don't mind, I'll
please.
speak for our group.
Yeah, Bethany, please.
Yeah, so I thought we had a really interesting discussion. So one, I think just still trying to figure out, like, particularly to AI, like how we can unearth the ways that AI can be used as a tool to help us innovate, to help us do our work as well as innovate on the work. We had an interesting sidebar around, AI and ethics and, the issues around exploitative labor practices, but that's a whole different discussion. It was wonderful. But
Stimulating,
Rebecca,
I bet, though, right?
yeah. Rebecca committed to just kind of like coming at things with that beginner's mindset. And which she said, she feels like initially she's like, I don't know that we can do anything different, but is going to commit to finding new ways and new views. Pav is going to continue, and you guys jump in if I'm in the boat here, but is going to continue to look at tools, AI tools that he can use to innovate. I've already talked to my boss about trying to do hackathons to help us, bring the minds together to tackle some big issues. So that's where we
That's
got.
great. So so in terms of hackathon, right, it doesn't have to be this massive undertaking, right? You can certainly do it, on a pilot scale to get people comfortable with it. And I'd be happy to have a sidebar discussion with you about how that might work.
Cool.
With regard to AI, recognize that most of these tools are free. Okay. So it's not like you have to go through some kind of procurement process or dig into your pockets. They're free. And they're notoriously easy to use, right? This is why generative AI has become such a phenomena, because you don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need to be an artificial intelligence engineer. You can now communicate. As of last week, you can actually speak to ChatGPT. You can take a photo and it will understand the photo, or you can type just like you text. So the important thing to understand is it may sound so mystifying, but at the end of the day, it's become so simple. It's like texting.
Yeah.
So, rather than wait, just, sign in, create an account for ChatGPT or for Bard or whatever you're comfortable with. If you're creative, and it sounds like a number of you are, right? Even within ChatGPT now, they've added DAL E3, and DAL, DALL-E, is their text to image generator. Okay, so within just ChatGPT, you've got extraordinary capability. And I'm not even talking about the $20 a month professional version, just the free version. So there's no time like the present. Okay, cool. Thank you all. All right, Tracy, was your group?
We spoke almost, we kind of call it a mini hackathon, so to speak, as far as organizing people. And we talked a lot about kind of pushing yourself to get out there and get more exposure to a variety of people, ideas. It doesn't have to be in your industry, in something like this course. And in my division, we do once a month, we'll do TED Talk lunches.
Oh, cool.
So that gets people talking about different, completely different topics outside of, the general finance world by any means. And I was mentioning one of the programs that I do. It's like a conversational partner with somebody, with a foreign student too, and that rotates and learn. And then we talked about, keeping each other kind of accountable to see, have you seen this? What do you think about taking this type of course? Or what do you think about this type of reading?
That's great. Now, Tracy, is Brown, or are you specifically a user of Microsoft Office? Is that a subscription that you personally use in your daily work? Excel and stuff?
We do, but we're really into like Google Sheets and stuff.
Okay.
So,
all right. The reason I ask is because Microsoft 365 Copilot has incorporated all of the OpenAI tools. And although, you need a subscription and there's a premium price for the AI empowered, but I will tell you the productivity benefits for someone like you in finance, right? Instantly create budgets, right? Instantly identify the profitability of it's so intuitive. It happens in seconds. And of course, you know what Brown IT will and will not support. But I would encourage you to look at this as a massive productivity increase for your team.
I was saying I use my son kind of as a resource for exposure to those type of things. And it was amazing, some of the things that I've done with ChatGPT that, you wouldn't even know of. Even this morning, we're waiting for the bus and 6 a.m. and he's like, tell me if the current president can fit in the new model Tesla that was created. And it goes through the whole thing. It's the president, it does his height, does that,
Yeah.
I've done ones with travel itinerary to places I've gone to see if it picks all the major spots too. Right. So there's definitely a variety, even outside. I think sometimes using it outside of your industry can open you up even more to unique ideas.
Oh, absolutely. But yet for you, but for you, there's something so specifically useful and helpful. Obviously, you'd have to, get Brown IT to sign off on getting you subscriptions, but it's pretty powerful. So, Julie, have we heard from you? Were you part of one of the teams that was represented? You were. Okay.
I was on Tracy's team.
Okay. Anyone else who hasn't yet gone? Eric, do you want to join or anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mike, I mean, I really enjoyed this program and I wish that in my career I had a leader like you to inspire me. But what I plan to do is bring this back to my leadership, this idea of this course. I mean, Brown has opened up these programs to staff for free now.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to, try to spread the gospel and also learn a little bit about ChatGPT. I've never used it, so I'm definitely looking forward to that.
That's very kind of you, Eric. And if you want to bring me in for 20 minutes on a call to help you spread the gospel of innovation, that's why I'm here, my man. And please try ChatGPT. I mean, there's no reason to be intimidated. It is, it's so easy to use, right? And Pam, how old is your son that's telling you about all this cool stuff at 6 a.m?
He is 17.
Okay, so he's in high school.
He's been in it for he's been 5. So he's done a lot with coding and stuff too. So, but those are I think I mentioned he has Asperger's, so he's extremely creative as it is. So just it's kind of finding those situations and those people and submersing yourself in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, listen, we're going to go through a more formal wrap up, but one of the things I think we have learned as educators is that if we give you 5 minutes now to complete the course evaluation, there's a much, much higher likelihood that it will get done. So I'm going to ask if you would be so kind. Remember, this is the first time we've offered this course at Brown. And so our teaching assistant, Nalim, is about to, or maybe has already shared the evaluation link in the chat. And so if you would, and don't be intimidated. So it looks like they did your classic copy and paste where it says the title is calling this course DEI Strategies, right? Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Strategy. Obviously, that's not the title of this course, or I really missed the mark big time, although I do have a lot of DEI workshop background experience. But the questions other than the improper title are correct. So would you please just take 5 minutes, if you could, complete the survey, and then we will wrap up the course and send you off into the good night. Okay. Thank you. John, Eric, if you're speaking, you're muted.
I know. I just figured that out.
Okay. All right.
What time is that event? Your hackathon going to be on the 28th?
It's going to start at 10:30 in the morning and it's going to go until 6 p.m. And anybody that is interested, I will follow up. I have all of your emails. So I will follow up for all of you who are interested in learning more. That doesn't mean, any obligation, but happy to send you a little bit more data. about how we're going to run the event. Okay. And all are welcome. And you don't have to come for the whole day either. Don't feel like, if you come, you have to stay for the whole day. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, guys, I will tell you that I really enjoyed the opportunity. You guys really leaned into the course. I very much appreciate. And Neelam, do you have your hand up?
I do. There's a question in the chat from Rebecca about your
okay.
weekly reading list. Just wanted to point that out before the course ended.
Yes. Oh, wow. Do we have 2 hours, Rebecca? I was going to address this, but I appreciate that. So let me address Rebecca's question maybe to start with. Okay. And Rebecca, it's a fascinating time because one of my very favorite podcasts, probably a little bit too techie for most of you, is called Hard Fork. And Hard Fork has a very specific meaning in the world of tech where, a project is pivoting in a very different direction. But one of the two hosts is a gentleman who is one of the New York Times top technology columnists. And what he said on Friday, his weekly podcast, Kevin Reese said, he's doing this for a living and he can barely keep up. Okay. I have been doing this for my entire career and it is never, and this slide is the perfect slide as the backdrop. It's never moved more quickly. So what I would say is if you're reading a major publication, whether it be the New York Times business section or the Wall Street Journal, or if you prefer to get your, information from outside the country, the Financial Times, if you're reading any one thing, I would say, reading one of the major business publications because they're really covering AI in a very, very detailed way. The second thing that I would recommend that anybody who's interested, there's a magazine called Fast Company. I love Fast Company. I think they've done a brilliant job of covering the innovation economy. And I think that, that would be a worthwhile monthly digital subscription to have. And then there are just an infinite number of podcasts. And maybe one that is more general, right? Because it's not AI all the time, comes from the Boston Consulting Group. And it's called BCG, the So What. Okay. And so they're talking about innovation from many, many different dimensions and very many different perspectives. And I would think if you're keeping up with those three, you will be ahead of 90% of the population. And then what will happen, of course, is you'll see references in some of these publications, and it might open your mind to others. But if you're just, one podcast, one daily newspaper that also publishes on the weekend, and one monthly magazine, I think you've got more than enough to feel like you're staying current. Okay. I think anything more than that would be overkill for most of you. Okay. But this quote from Justin Trudeau is only more true today in 2023, almost 2024 than it was 5 or 6 years ago. And just last week, the number of announcements around Gen AI was just staggering. All right. So I think, we learned one thing, certainly, Rebecca said it well, right? We have to get out of our comfort zones. What got us to here, right? Regardless of how comfortable you may be with, the path that you took to get to where you are today. We all have to come to terms with the fact that things are going to change profoundly, more profoundly than they ever have. And so it's just going to be very important to get comfortable in being uncomfortable. Now, that may sound kind of insane, but I think that we need to recognize that we're always going to feel like we're a bit behind the 8 ball. And that's just modern life as we know it. And so anything that you can do to learn new skills that are going to allow you to be more comfortable and just as importantly, be more productive, right? If you can get your job done a lot more quickly because of new tools that are being made available to you, that clears space for the other important parts of your life, family and health and friends, right? We need to, more than ever, I think we need to be able to rejuvenate. right? And so, the struggle for balance is something that I think is a very noble fight. And maybe Gen AI will actually give us an opportunity to kind of get a little bit more balanced, although that's going to be up to everybody. Okay. Fear is never something that should hold us back. Okay. We're living in a very complex world and no one has a crystal ball. Right. And so we should not be afraid of what's about to come. Right. We need to have a high level of comfort that whatever people throw at us, along with the people that we work with, the people that support us, we're going to figure it out. Okay. We're going to figure it out. And so there's no need to fear like, oh my God, we're losing control. Okay. And I think the healthier we are physically and mentally, the better off we're going to be. So, there's no problem that is too big to solve if we break it down into small steps. And boy, it's amazing what a confidence builder it is to get a small win, right? So let's say, tomorrow Eric gets on ChatGPT and he says, my God, what was all the fuss about? This is pretty damn easy. Okay. And then Eric's going to be a lot more confident to go and, try something new because it's like, that wasn't so bad. Right. And so creativity is like anything else. It's like a muscle. You have to continue to maintain it or it will become atrophied. All right. And so remember, creativity is not just a talent we're born with. I think anybody that is creative is someone who practices that creativity constantly. Okay. And I hopefully have given you guys the confidence to feel good about. So, just very quickly, right? We talked about this disruptive world that we're living in, right? That was a very important part of the first session, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in, what job you're in. Disruption is a continuous thing that's going to continue to happen. We talked about some of the skill sets and tool sets to allow you to innovate and unlock new possibilities. Last week, we talked about creative culture. And I think we had a very productive breakout where you guys helped one another reframe your thinking on certain problems. And today we talked about, creating, more creative confidence and introduced the notion of having accountability partners to introduce these small steps that we talked about. And, in constantly just micro leveling up day by day, week by week, month by month, our innovation skills and our creative capacity. So guys, I am always available as a sounding board. I am available, right? You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just Mike Grandinetti. And some of you already have, but if you haven't, feel free. That is a great way to reach out to me. You can certainly reach out to me on email. You all have my personal email address. But I will say I do get inundated with email and sometimes I miss email, but I don't miss communications when it comes through LinkedIn, right? So if you're not a big LinkedIn user, LinkedIn has a direct messaging feature that comes in very handy. And if I can be a sounding board, or if you need me to help you talk to someone in your organization to, reinforce some of the things that you learned, I'd be happy to do that. I'd be flattered to do that. Okay. So that's really all I have. When I get next down to the Brown campus, I'll try to get people enough warning. It might be fun to go out and have a coffee with the group and see how you're progressing. But I would love to do that. I'd love to meet all of you. I feel like I've gotten to know you really well over the last several weeks. Okay. So guys, thank you so much. Nalim, thank you for being a great TA. Rachel, thank you for providing the media services to get us through. And I wish you every success as you begin to put some of these concepts into practice. I have no doubt all of you are more than capable of mastering them. Okay. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.